countdown to issue 100 has begun. One of the reasons why I started this series looking at Marvel Team Up was so that we would get the opportunity to see some characters that we don't normally see. And today is a good example of that, as we begin with issue 91 and Ghost Rider. I'm pretty sure I haven't covered any Ghost Rider stories before, although he has appeared in Marvel Team Up before this. The writer is Stephen Grant, who has described this as his most successful team-up story. The artist is Pat Broderick, a man who had recently been working on Captain Marvel's title. Now, let's buy a ticket for the Carnival of Souls. Now, first things first, this is a great comic to read on a summer's day, because Peter Parker is taking Glory Grant and us to the carnival. Because it is, in fact, the last day of carnival season. And Peter, along with everybody else, is having a great time. Not sure how long that's going to last for him, though. Glory wants to go and see the Freak Show. Don't call him that anymore, Glory. Although there is quite an intriguing lineup. There's the amazing six-armed Spider-Man. Six-armed Spider-Man. As if. The rather familiar-looking Muck Monster. And the incredible Blazing Skull. It's this act that Peter and Glory see take to the stage, displaying not just a blazing skull, but an entire burning skeleton. Despite what should be a spectacular act, the audience aren't impressed, booing and shouting out, "Fake!" Tough crowd. Actually, Peter recognises this skeletal form. Now, normally in these kind of circumstances, the character recognising another character would play their cards close to their chest, consider their options. Not Peter. He just straight away shouts out, "That's the Ghost Rider! What's he doing in a sideshow?" This turns out to be precisely the wrong thing to do, as Peter then gets himself kicked out for disrupting the show. Even the Blazing Skull has been affected by the disturbance, but in a different way. What was it that young man said? What name did he call out? Both Peter and Glory think there's something more going on here than just a straightforward carnival act. So, once the date is over and they've both headed home, Peter gets changed and returns under cover of darkness as the incredible Spider-Man. As you would expect, the carnival is now generally quiet. But after fighting off some overzealous guard dogs, Spidey is confronted by the man from the Freak Show and his group of carny cronies. The six-armed Spider-Man is there, and what do you know? He really does have 6 arms. Not that he's any match for our Spider-Man, of course. But the rest of the hired muscle seem to be standing back, waiting for somebody else to deal with their intruder. We don't have to wait long to find out who that somebody else is. It is the Blazing Skull, now revealed in his more familiar guise of the Ghost Rider. I was never really into Ghost Rider growing up. I just think he looked a bit too silly for me, too different from all the other superheroes. Also, I don't remember him being in any comics that were on sale in my local shop. There was a kid down my street who had a few Ghost Rider comics, and I remember thinking, who is this guy? The Ghost Rider, that is, not the kid. I knew who he was. His name was Stephen West. We all suspected it, didn't we? And now we see it confirmed, that Ghost Rider somehow is under the influence of this guy from the carnival. Anyway, forget the carnival. This is what we pay our entrance fee for. Superheroes fighting other superheroes. Although it seems that Ghost Rider isn't in a very talkative mood today. Never mind, Spidey takes the opportunity to escape the battle, but not for long, because Ghost Rider soon pursues him to the top of the roller coaster. Spidey's evasive manoeuvres don't quite work, and once he is hit by Ghost Rider's hellfire, it isn't too long before it's lights out. When Spidey comes to, he discovers that he's being held by that guy from the Freak Show, the guy who now reveals himself to be Moondark the Magician. Name doesn't mean anything to you? That's not a surprise. Spidey only barely remembers him. The two crossed paths back in issue 12, when Moondark was thought to have fallen to his death from the Golden Gate Bridge. But the very dark beings that he worshipped were willing to give him a second chance at life, in exchange for his soul. a deal that he accepted but resented. And since returning to the mortal plane, he has made it his task to steal as many souls as possible with which to buy back his own. Most of these are stored in what he calls his soul orb, but that belonging to Johnny Blaze is so precious to him that he stores it in his special ring. And now he's going to use the soul orb to take Spider-Man's soul. Yeah, as if Webhead's going to let that happen. He manages to break free of his bonds, but it's too late. The soul-stealing mist from the orb is upon him. However, Moondark's decision to explain his entire plan to Spidey will be his downfall. Because whilst Spidey is still struggling to keep a hold of his soul, he fires a thread-thin stream of webbing at Moondark's ring and yanks it off of his finger. And before you know it, a rejuvenated Ghost Rider is once more free not just of the ring, but of Moondark's influence. And now it's time for the Carney cronies to get involved. Ghost Rider is having fun fighting them, but then he thinks, why am I wasting my time with these? I should go to their leader. And he engulfs Moondark in hellfire. But something's not right. Rather than suffering, Moondark is unaffected by the fire. It seems that because he has no soul, he cannot be affected by the hellfire. But he can affect them. And after downing them with a spell, he then conjures up his dark master. The devil, I assume? And he says to his master, it is time for him to be returned his soul, and in exchange he offers the souls of Spider-Man, of Ghost Rider, and the 100 other souls stored within his orb. 100 souls? That's quite a lot. And Ghost Rider realises they are key to the deal. So, using his hellfire to burn through the ectoplasmic skin of the orb, he destroys it, releasing the souls and leaving Moondark with nothing to offer his master. As the carnival workers' souls return to them, Moondark's master turns on him. He is displeased by Moondark's failure. In lieu of those 100 souls, he will take and kill him. Spidey has to turn away from this sight, but Ghost Rider is lapping it up, saying it is just what Moondark deserved. And then we get one of those introspective, philosophical endings that never really go anywhere, as Spider-Man watches Ghost Rider leave and thinks, has some change occurred? In that brief absence of Johnny Blaze's soul, has Ghost Rider become crueler, less human? Without any answers, Spider-Man continues to watch the Ghost Rider ride off, watching him for a long time. As much as Stephen Grant considered that issue a success, he is less enthusiastic about the next one, describing it as his weakest effort on the title. And yeah, the storyline, if you can call it that, is that Spider-Man and Hawkeye fight Mr. Fear. That's it. There really isn't anything more to it than that. With issue 93, we finally get a story that lasts more than one issue. At this stage in his history, Jack Russell had gained control over his transformation into a werewolf, hence the dropping of the by night part of his name. And there's a lot going on in this issue. Spidey and the werewolf take on the odd but interesting Tatterdemalion. I think I said that right. But there is also some shady operator in the background, along with a woman named Danson Macabre, who herself seems to be being followed. Issue 94, with pencils from Mike Zeck before he really hit his stride, reveals that the mystery man from the previous issue was actually the Shroud. He was pretending to be a big crime boss in LA so that he could bring the genuine criminals down from within. Spider-Man hasn't quite worked this out by the end of the issue, when we have an infamously rushed ending, as we go from one panel where he is determined to track the Shroud down, to the very next panel where he decides he just can't be bothered. Which brings us to issue 95 and a debut. Spider-Man's titles had always been a breeding ground for new superheroes who then went on to have their own careers. Monica Rambeau's Captain Marvel first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man Annual 16 in 1982. The same year that Cloak and Dagger burst onto the scene in Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, issue 64. Of course, that isn't even mentioning the Punisher, who first appeared in issue 129 of The Amazing Spider-Man back in the 70s. Now Marvel Team Up had its own debutante. Kind of. Bobbi Morse had actually been around for about a decade at this point, as a supporting character and a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. But this issue saw her debut a new identity, Mockingbird. But this wasn't her first time out in costume. A few years before, she had appeared as the Huntress in a solitary black and white issue. And if you want to see more of that, you're in luck. I didn't want to talk too much about that comic in this episode, in case it slowed things down a bit too much, and in case you just weren't interested. So instead, I've made an entire RetroMarvelMan Extra video all about it. It's shorter than the usual show, and best of all, you don't get to see my face at all. So follow this link if you want to check out more of the prototype Mockingbird. Until then, we will take a look at the finished article in a tale brought to us once more by Stephen Grant, this time with pencils by Jimmy Janes, a man more familiar to fans of DC's Legion of Superheroes. Peter Parker has just touched down in JFK Airport, having returned from his various adventures in Los Angeles. But as happy as he is to be back, I don't know. I think there could be trouble brewing in the background here. One of those two guys barges past Peter. Could be carelessness. However, his spider sense tells him otherwise and confirms our suspicions. However, it isn't him that they are after. It turns out there was somebody else on that plane that they are far more interested in. It's a woman, and they catch up to her in the car park. But it turns out that their target is something of a hard target. Because although they think they've got the drop on her, holding a gun to her back, she can see them through the rearview mirror of her car and has known all this time that they were following her. Plus, she knows how to handle herself. After giving both those guys some food for thought, our mystery woman makes a second attempt to get to her car, only to discover a third antagonist has beaten her to it. This one armed with some kind of high-tech firearm. But all that achieves is exposing the woman's hidden costume. The woman, by the way, who he refers to as Bobbi. Then, just as he aims the gun at Bobbi's head, well, you know who gets involved, don't you? Having dealt with that guy, Spider-Man wants answers. Unfortunately, Bobbi isn't hanging around to give them, although she is now wearing a much more recognisable costume, to us anyway. Just then, one of the cars in the car parks hovers skyward, and Bobbi thinks Supreme Headquarters must really want me to use one of those in broad daylight. A flying car? Supreme Headquarters? No, it couldn't be. It's clear to Spidey that there's nothing that this woman can do to escape the flying car, so he tries to help out. Do you know, it amazes me how many guys are depicted wearing hats like this in 1980. Were they still that common? Anyway, Spidey soon deals with these 1950s rejects. And look at this. A fight on a flying car? Fantastic. So we have the beginnings of a storyline, we have some intrigue, we have mystery, and we've got some really good action. This is a great issue. Just as one of the guys tries to tell Spider-Man that they are from he is silenced by one of Bobbi's staves, the very first time that she is shown using them. I've mentioned the Huntress, and indeed the Huntress did have all of Bobbi's fighting prowess that she shows in this issue, but she didn't have those staves. Hopping aboard the flying car and jettisoning the, let's be honest, agent, Bobbi now introduces herself as Mockingbird. Shortly after which, she reveals that the people she was fighting were from S.H.I.E.L.D. Spidey isn't happy with this, as he realises he's helped to fight off government agents. But equally, Mockingbird isn't interested in turning the car around and handing herself in. So at the first opportunity, she jumps ship, giving us a good look at her costume as she does so. I do like this Mockingbird costume a lot, more so than the bathing suit version that it kind of transitioned into during her time with the West Coast Avengers. Spider-Man realises that if he doesn't follow suit, he's going to end up somewhere over the Atlantic. So as the car approaches the lapping waves of the sea, he leaps for it, rather clumsily, knocking himself out in the process. This time when Spider-Man regains consciousness, he doesn't find himself in chains. He is a free man. Kind of. Because he has been picked up by S.H.I.E.L.D. and is now facing a man called Delandan, who is a director of that particular branch of S.H.I.E.L.D., and someone who appears to be Colonel Fury. But it isn't. It's a life model decoy. An exact copy of Nick Fury in every way, apart from the eyes. The only way you can tell them apart. S.H.I.E.L.D. blames Spider-Man for Mockingbird escaping, a woman who Delandan describes as a very dangerous criminal. He owes them. So, to pay them back, they have set a trap for Mockingbird, and he is going to help spring it. They also explain Mockingbird's background to Spider-Man. The fact that she used to work for S.H.I.E.L.D., but now appears to have defected. That, under the name Huntress, she destroyed one of their South American operations. I assume they're referring to the business in Mexico that was covered in Marvel Super Action, although Mexico is North America. Then we get something that we've never seen before. An image of the Huntress in colour. And then we are told that a few months ago she wrecked a S.H.I.E.L.D. base in Seattle. On that occasion she was still dressed in her Huntress outfit, but called herself Mockingbird. And then now she has her redesigned costume. And rather good it looks too. Great pose, kid. So, okay, she certainly does sound like a dangerous criminal. However, if you've read Marvel Super Action or watched RetroMarvelMan Extra, you'll know there's a lot more to that story than is being told here. Anyway, her next mission is a doozy, as it seems she intends to assassinate Nick Fury. So, S.H.I.E.L.D. have made it known that Nick Fury is there at their current location, although of course it's the life model decoy, and when she arrives to kill him, Spider-Man will be there waiting. And so it is that 2 hours later, Mockingbird, surrounded by incognito S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, approaches their hidden base. With her S.H.I.E.L.D. knowledge, it's not difficult for her to gain entry to the place, and then once she has changed out of her civvies, the action can begin. Before too long, she comes across the life model decoy of Fury. He ain't hanging around, but she ain't letting him get away. Her battle staves, joined together to make a staff, bring him down before she discovers she's been tricked. And with the wall crawler present, the trap is closed. But Mockingbird is no easy prey, and she insists she has to get to Fury, even if she has to go through Spider-Man to do it. We get a kind of reenactment of the front cover before Spider-Man just sticks her to the floor, saying he won't let her kill Nick Fury. To which Mockingbird replies, "Kill him? I'm trying to help him." I knew she didn't want to kill him. She then explains that, consistent with her exploits as the Huntress, that S.H.I.E.L.D. is corrupt, and she has with her a microfilm with all of the evidence to prove that corruption. And she is desperate to get it to Nick Fury, the only man in the organisation who can truly be trusted. That is all that Delandan needed to hear, as he makes a dramatic entrance, wearing a different outfit and sporting a weapon he calls the Satan Claw. What a great name for a weapon. That glove provides him with enhanced strength, emits sedative gas, and can incinerate whatever it touches, including Mockingbird's high-tech earrings that contain the microfilm. All that is left to do now is put a stop to Mockingbird once and for all. We then get one final skirmish as Spider-Man upends Del and Dan. He strikes Mockingbird with his ungloved hand, whilst Spider-Man manages to whip off the Satan Claw glove from his other hand. That is then easily destroyed before Del and Dan knocks Spidey sideways with shockwaves. We then get a bit of an odd moment, but I guess that's comic books for you. As with the two heroes helpless on the floor, Del and Dan sends out a message to all S.H.I.E.L.D. operatives that if they should see Spider-Man or Mockingbird, they should shoot them to kill. And then says he's going to do that himself. Why bother sending out that message? But he doesn't get to kill them anyway, because his gun is shot from his hand by who? It's the life model decoy. That seems to be going against its programming. But of course, it isn't. What's he doing to his patched eye? Don't tell me they put a coloured contact lens in the eye that nobody sees. So yeah, in terms of writing, this whole page is a little bit wobbly. Anyway, Del and Dan is now defeated and wrapped up in Spider-Man's webbing. There's even better news than that, because Mockingbird had a copy of that microfilm, and she now rushes to Nick Fury to hand it to him. But remember that shoot to kill order from Del and Dan? Well, as other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents enter the room, they see Mockingbird running towards Nick Fury, and they carry out that order to their best ability. Luckily, they didn't entirely succeed. Mockingbird is shot, severely wounded, but she isn't dead. Fury is going to do what he can to keep her alive. After all, it's thanks to her efforts that he is now able to clean up S.H.I.E.L.D. and return it to what it should be. Yeah, I said it at the beginning, and I'll say it again now. This is a very good issue. Indeed, Mockingbird did survive, although she was in a coma for a while, before cameoing in, of course, the Marvel Superhero Contest of Champions, and then fully returning to action in Hawkeye's 1983 miniseries. Hawkeye. I really should take a proper look at that chap someday. Until then, issue 96... well, I'm not going to do this, but it is worth mentioning that Alan Kupperberg not only wrote this one, but also penciled, inked, lettered it, and provided the colours too. Pretty impressive, and one better than John Byrne's work on the Batman Captain America crossover. Next up, they tried something different with issue 97, as we got a brand new headliner, The Incredible Hulk. This was the first of 3 headliner gigs for the Jade Giant, which made sense because at that time his TV show was the talk of the town. Incidentally, this was the last issue written by Stephen Grant. All the same, I'm not going to go into this one because I'm really not a fan of the art. Carmine Infantino, inked by Al Gordon. But don't worry, Hulk fans, I dare say that we will take a look at one or even both of his other 2 headliner appearances. For similar reasons, I'm not going to take an in-depth look at issue 98. We have seen a Black Widow story before, and we will again. Instead, let's take a look at a character that we haven't focused on before, Machine Man. Created by Jack Kirby for his 2001 spin-off series, Machine Man had a bit of an erratic introduction to the Marvel Universe. His first appearance was in issue 8 in 1977, where he was referred to as X-51, a name he would revert to in the future. Issue 9 saw him called Mr. Machine, and then issue 10 saw the series cancelled, as Marvel lost the rights to 2001. Within a year, he was back with a new name and his own series. By the time this came out, Marvel were really trying to give him a bit of a push. Adverts for his series had appeared in comics throughout 1980, and just 1 week before this came out, he had starred in the 3rd Marvel Team-Up Annual. No Jack Kirby for this one though. Instead, it's written by Tom DeFalco, with Jerry Bingham doing the doodling. There's all sorts of strangeness going on page 1 of this story. For a start, there's the very old school layout of a giant-sized Spider-Man watching over the other guest stars from this issue. But that's okay, I don't have any real issues with that. Then it tells us about a special bonus feature, which is 2 villains for the price of 1. How is that a bonus feature? A bonus feature is a centre page pin-up, or an extra story, or an interview with one of the creators, or something like that. But just having 2 villains in it, that's not a bonus feature. But that's not the weirdest thing on this page. The weirdest thing is tucked up in the corner here, where it says, "Will our web-spinning wonder find true happiness with a computerised crusader?" Are they going on a date or something? Well, the story doesn't begin in a very romantic location, because it begins at a high-security prison, where the Sandman is seeing out his current period of incarceration. Not just in a cell, but in a free-flowing plexiglass bubble, designed by Reed Richards. Couldn't we all have guessed it was designed by Reed Richards? Whilst elsewhere in the same prison, Baron Brimstone uses his mystical powers to enthrall one of the guards, who then promptly releases him from his cell. You may be wondering who Baron Brimstone is, which I think is reasonable, bearing in mind before this he'd only appeared in one other comic. That was issue 16 of Machine Man, in which he tried to briefly take over the criminal underworld. He then uses his powers to materialise in the Sandman's cell, and after a brief skirmish with the guards, whisk him away to freedom and his, the Baron's, plush upstate residence. Once there, the Baron explains to Sandman that he wants his help in getting revenge on Machine Man for scuppering his attempts to be a big crime lord. What they're going to do is they're going to kidnap a woman called Pamela Quinn. She works with Machine Man's civilian identity of Aaron Stack. Once she is kidnapped, Machine Man will come to her rescue and they can then defeat Machine Man. The funny thing is, in the Baron's previous appearance, he also kidnapped Pamela Quinn. This is beginning to look like victimisation. Then news of the prison break becomes the order of the day. Peter Parker, remember him, takes an acute interest in the fact that the Sandman was involved, whereas Machine Man, who, without his faceplate, looks really cool, takes more of an interest in the fact that Baron Brimstone was involved. And he knows full well that the Baron is going to cause him problems. It doesn't take long for those problems to materialise. Mere hours later, Machine Man, aka Aaron Stack, is busy at the insurance company that he works for. God, what a boring alter ego. When suddenly our 2 antagonists appear, both of which like to create a bit of a spectacle. With Pamela safely tucked away under a desk, Aaron runs at the Sandman, and the action kicks off with an awesome panel. All this time, Spidey has been out searching for signs of the Sandman, and as he swings by the insurance company, so boring, his spider sense tells him he's found him. Unfortunately, both of our heroes time their approach to Sandy quite badly, and they slam into each other. The Baron is put off by Spider-Man's unexpected presence. However, with Pamela Quinn now in their possession, our 2 baddies make good their escape. Machine Man is still relatively new to the scene, and Spider-Man thinks, according to the media, Machine Man is a mechanised marauder. Oh, Spidey, you of all people should know better than to believe the press. And so, despite Machine Man's best efforts to talk, we get a nice superhero versus superhero clash. And it gives us a nice demonstration of both of their powers. Spider-Man's agility and, of course, webs, and Machine Man's extendable limbs and spinning at the waist, which he loved to do. The fight eventually ends when Machine Man, having Spider-Man at his mercy, lets him go and says, "There, I've released you. Now do you believe my good intentions?" And Spidey thinks, "Wow, I treated him the way that Jolly Jameson treats me." Exactly. Misunderstandings now ironed out, the pair discuss where the villains could be. Spidey actually put a tracer on the Baron, but since he and the others zapped away, he's lost all trace of the signal. So Machine Man, studying the circuitry of one of the spider tracers, boosts the scanning for the signal and finds that they are 30 miles north of the city. So Machine Man, making use of a go-go gadget copter, transports the pair of them to that out-of-town mansion house. There we see that Pam isn't quite as keen on Machine Man as he is on her. But that discussion is cut short by Spider-Man's direct approach with the Baron. I like it. I also like the Sandman's response. Jerry Bingham is doing a great job with the action in this issue. As Machine Man takes on Sandman, Spidey follows the Baron as he tries to escape. But actually, it's a trap. He wanted Spider-Man to follow him, and he now finds himself in some twisted other dimension. Once there, the Baron says that Spidey is no match for his peerless power, and he conjures up a few fiendish friends. I've noticed there is a lot of alliteration in this issue, and I know that's a bit of a comic book trope, but they really take it to the next level in this. We've got a lovable living robot, some worrisome webbing, in the same panel as a Simonised stooge. I don't even know what that means. Another panel has busting my bolts and lubricated limbs. That holds Spidey helpless. And it goes on and on. It's as though Tom DeFalco was doing it for a bet. Anyway, Spidey battles the ghastly goons, even though at one point he is thrown like a tattered trifle. How would a trifle even be tattered? Eventually, rather than fight the demons, he uses his agility to get to the Baron, to whom he says, "You don't know how to fight fair." No, but he is an imperious icon of alliteration. And then, after the Baron calls him a misbegotten maggot, Spidey finds the Baron's technological backplate, which he sometimes uses to boost his power, and basically pulls the plug. This pops them back to Earth, and after Spidey sends the Baron to sleep, he helps Machine Man to defeat Sandy. Machine Man tries to use his spinning trick to turn himself effectively into a fan and blow the Sandman away. So when Sandman solidifies himself to counter that, Spidey is able to blind him, and whilst distracted, Machine Man plugs himself and Sandy into the mains. His plans scuppered once more, the Baron makes his escape, promising he will return. Yeah, well, it'll be a few years, so don't hold your breath. Pam is completely ungrateful, bearing in mind this is the second time that she's been saved by Machine Man. But that's okay for us, because it gives us the excuse to have one of those poignant hero walking away endings that Marvel Team Up loves so much. But we're not sad, because up next is issue 100. Sadly, Machine Man's own series only lasted a few more months after this appearance, before it bit the dust. But, as that handsome young man just said, this series hit a milestone, as it released its 100th issue. This is the correct way to celebrate a 100th issue. Firstly, it's double-sized. Secondly, it is brought to us by a superstar creative team of the 80s, as former regular writer Chris Claremont returns, and Frank Miller, who had produced several covers for recent issues, goes one better by providing the internal art too. Not only that, but we have our second debut of the episode, as future New Mutants member Karma takes a bow. If you don't want to see it after that, I don't even know why you're here. This story is called Karma, She Possesses People, and we don't have to wait any time at all to see her powers in action. Because on page 1 we see Spidey having this mid-air crisis and this kind of psychic splash effect that we're going to see again and again in this story. The next few pages are spent watching Spidey having this internal struggle as he tries to retain control of his mind and his body, and during this sequence our glimpses of Karma look really good, really atmospheric, sinister. Eventually, the pink tinge to his speech and thought bubbles tell us that she has won the mental battle, but now she needs to master his physical abilities. In doing this, we are given a good demonstration of his powers, the kind of thing you get in an annual, where you kind of put the character in the shop window for people who may not normally buy their comic. So we see his agility, his webs, his strength. And based on what we can see him or her thinking, this possession clearly isn't a malicious act. She has genuine need and use for his powers. Whilst she gets used to being Spidey, we move across the city, where we join a charity party being held by a former South Vietnamese general and now self-made multi-millionaire. He has spent a significant amount of his money on sculptures by the renowned artist Alicia Masters. She is present, along with her beau, the Thing, and his teammates from the Fantastic Four. Despite his love for her work, Alicia just can't bring herself to like the former general. Ben Grimm agrees and is looking forward to leaving the party. And now this scene is being watched over by Spidey. But what does he see? He sees a young Vietnamese child asking for his sister, but being silenced by one of the former general's lackeys. Spidey, or whoever it is that's in control of his body, takes great exception to this. It seems that Karma is the sister that this young boy was asking about. This is why she wanted Spider-Man's powers, so she could free the young lad and his younger sister from the custody of the former general. Spidey just has time to tell them that he's been sent by their sister when Karma discovers another of Spidey's powers. Not that she knows what it is yet, which is to Mr. Fantastic's advantage, as he and the Thing try to stop Spidey from apparently kidnapping these children. Reed notices that Spidey isn't his usual fluent self. This is due to Karma's inexperience with his powers, with his body, but nonetheless, she still causes them enough trouble. We see a young Vietnamese man, the nephew of the general, suggest that he deals with Spidey, but the general says, no, not yet. Keep your unique talents hidden for now. Instead, the Invisible Girl gets involved, saying, I don't want to do this, Spidey. You're a friend, and she and Reed owe their son's life to him. Yeah, pretty much. She's referring to what happened in issue 88. In that issue, Franklin was kidnapped whilst being babysat by Alicia, kidnapped by a gang, who then used him to get leverage over Sue to get her to rob a rival firm's bank. Spidey got involved, helped to rescue Franklin, and also, after liaising with his friend on the force, Jean DeWolf, got the gang arrested. But it seems that that is now all forgotten by the webhead, and things get very intense as he deals with Sue by slapping her. This enrages Reed and Ben, but still they struggle to get their hands on him. All this means that it is now time for that young man, the nephew, to use his hidden talents, which look surprisingly familiar. So yes, this is another sibling. This is Karma's older brother, and although he has the same ability as her to possess people, he doesn't do that here. More just drives her out of Spidey's head. Not that the Fantastic Four know that that's what's happened, and with Spider-Man dazed and confused, the Thing finally gets a bead on him. When Spidey comes to, he is at the Baxter building, and Johnny has finally turned up. We're told that the General didn't want the police to get involved, for Spider-Man's benefit. I doubt that. Other than that, Spidey is filled in on what happened, and it's only after Reed kind of gives him a brain scan that they work out that during that period he was not in control of his actions. Somebody else must have been. We then get a surprise cameo as Reed puts in a telephone call to Professor X. Apparently, this is so that the Professor can confirm that Cerebro picked up a lot of mutant activity earlier that evening. Although really, let's be honest, it's just Chris Claremont shoehorning in an advert for the X-Men. Before you know it, Reed has knocked up a portable version of Cerebro. It's that easy. And all 5 heroes follow the signal to its source in a church. Spidey, still angry at being possessed earlier, goes off half-cocked, and, ignoring the young girl he sees inside, attacks the only man there, the priest, It's only when Karma possesses the Human Torch that Spidey realises his error. And we get more heroes fighting heroes. Fantastic. They are basically fighting out a stalemate when Sue Storm casually holds them apart. And then as the priest begins to berate the heroes for fighting in a church, Karma breaks down, begging him for forgiveness. She then explains her background in Vietnam, with her older brother and 2 younger siblings. She says they saw horrific things, lived incredibly tough lives. She and her elder brother discovered their abilities, and he used his more mercilessly than she ever did. Then one day, their uncle tried to get them all out of the country to safety. But in the end, it was only her older brother that was taken. And the uncle, knowing her brother's abilities, was keen for him to work for him. Eventually, she and her younger siblings also escaped the country and made their way across the seas to America. She was looking after her younger brother and sister until the day she returned home to find them gone. Her uncle called and told her that he had the children and they would remain safe as long as she also worked for him. This she was not willing to do, and so she decided to find a supervillain that she could possess to take back her family. In fact, Spider-Man wasn't the villain she thought he was, and instead she has just dragged another good person into this mess. Spider-Man is no longer angry with Karma, he is angry instead with her uncle. In fact, all of the heroes now want to help her. That night at midnight, those children are about to be put on board a ship by some of their uncle's associates. Luckily for them, their sister also has associates, and those associates have a portable Cerebro that led them straight to Karma's brother and this location. Spider-Man's doing pretty well, but of course he isn't alone. Imagine that. Not only does this gang have Spider-Man to deal with, but the entire Fantastic Four. They are out of their depth. But of course the gang aren't completely defenceless against super types because they have one of their own. And Karma's brother quickly possesses the Thing. As he says, his mind now belongs to him. Grotesque one. It's one thing to possess him, but you don't need to insult him as well. And unfortunately, Karma's brother is more powerful than her, which means that he doesn't just possess the Thing, but all of the Fantastic Four. And you know what that means? It's time for Spider-Man to be impressive again. In a few years' time, he would embarrass the X-Men in the Secret Wars. But now, this night, he takes on Marvel's first family. And it's a great fight, including one hell of a punch planted squarely on the Thing's jaw. We are told that Spidey's moves, flowing from one to the next, make this seem more like a ballet, a meticulously choreographed work of art, rather than a battle to the death. More like a ballet. I like that. Although it does remind me of when Spider-Man and his amazing friends went to see the Dallas Ballet. Still the fight continues, and still Spider-Man, for the time being at least, stays a step ahead of his adversaries. But it can't possibly last. As a possessed Human Torch says, his mutant mind can make those 4 incredible bodies act as one, giving him the ultimate, nigh unbeatable fighting force. Not if Webhead's got anything to do with it. This is such a good fight. But then it seems that perhaps the Thing, who has already clipped Spider-Man, is going to finish him off. Maybe not, because Karma has seen enough. She says no more death, no more pain. She frees the heroes from her brother's mind control, and then, using every ounce of effort, doesn't just stop him, but absorbs his soul into her. This means that she now has balance, and as she is reunited once more with her young siblings, she calls herself for for the first time, karma. Reed explains karma, the sum total of the positive and negative acts of a person's life in one incarnation, through which the quality of life in the next incarnation is determined, until at last a person of pure positive karma achieves nirvana, literally oneness with the universe. Yeah, thanks for that, Reed. And then we finish with words that can be a bit corny at the end of a tale, but on this occasion I think are entirely appropriate. As we finish with not the end, but the beginning. And indeed it was for that character. But that's not all we get in this double-sized anniversary issue, because we also get a really good backup story. It's a team-up between Storm and the Black Panther. And if that doesn't sound good enough, then just look at the creative team. It was the current superstars of the X-Men, Chris Claremont and John Byrne. What they give us is a tale featuring Ororo and T'Challa taking on an adversary from their shared youth in Africa. To be honest, I think it would have made a good graphic novel. But it also shows what this title could be capable of when it wasn't just focused on Spider-Man. It can give us some background story, some history, some depth to other characters, and the chance to see two characters who don't normally cross paths. It would be another 2 years before Karma reappeared in Marvel Graphic Novel 4 as the New Mutants were gathered together in September 1982. It has to be said, we've had some pretty good issues to look at today. Only 50 more to go.